Good evening, good evening, good evening, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Cultivate Your Mental Wealth. I am your host, Joyce Ozeh, and for those of you who do not know me, I am a civil rights attorney living in Chicago. I am also a mental health advocate. And finally, I am someone with lived experience. What do I mean by that? That just means that I have lived experience with anxiety and major depression specifically. So everything we talk about are just things that I have used in my actual life to go from a place of illness to wellness and from mental wellness to mental abundance. That's what it's all about. What does mental wealth even mean? It means that we were designed to live in the overflow. It means that once you get well, it is actually a part of your calling and your purpose to ensure that your community is well and that those around you, those who look like us and even beyond, are also well. And I believe that we are more than enough and we have more than enough to live this life of mental wealth. So that's what this show is all about. For those of you who have been tuning into the show, welcome back. And before I even get into everything we're going to be digging in today, I want to say, how have y'all been? How have you all been? Please put in the chat how you've been, where you're tuning in from. And I've missed you. I've genuinely missed you. The last time we had a conversation, I think it was March. And so many changes in my life. Those of you who are long listeners of the show, this is a different background. I've moved to a different part of the city, still Chi-Town. Don't get it twisted. Just a different part of the city. So I took a little bit of a break just to kind of pack and then unpack and get settled in. But I'm so happy to be here with you all again. So let me know how you're doing, where you're tuning in from, rep your city. I also would like to know what's one thing you do or one thing you hope to do to take care of your mental health. So, where are you tuning in from? And what is one thing that you do or one thing that you kind of hope to practice to take care of your mental health? Let's just speak that into existence. I also want to give you an overview of today's show, what you can expect. As always, I'm going to be checking in on all of you from time to time throughout the show. So make sure that you are dropping your comments in the chat box. I also want to make sure that we are continuing in our theme for 2024. And this year, I'm calling the year of the renewed mind. The year of the renewed mind. So much of mental wellness is renewing your mind. And that is not just like hippie talk. It's creating new neural pathways in your brain so that you don't always have to think the way you've always thought, and you don't always have to be who you've always been. So, this is going to be our year of the renewed mind and renewing our minds. So, that's today's theme. You can also expect a very special episode today that I've kind of been teasing y'all about for the past year plus or since we started the show. And today is going to be our listeners series, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And then I'll leave you with some practical pushes so that what we talk about here doesn't just stay here, but there are practical ways to apply what we've discussed. And for those of you who are feeling a little shy, you know that you can always communicate with me and my team individually for follow-up at our email address, and that's comethrive247@gmail.com. That is comethrive247@gmail.com. Okay. Thank you for those who already emailed, by the way. We have a lot of good stuff coming up, and I'm very excited. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of our show, I want to go over some housekeeping rules. And I know it's a Tuesday. I know people are watching from all over the world. Who knows what time it is for you, where you're at. But let's just take a deep breath and center ourselves. Sometimes we can be moving so fast that we forget to breathe deeply. We forget to let enough oxygen just flow through us to ground us. And I want to say that no matter how your day has been, no matter how your week has been going or what's been on your plate, this is your space. And this is a time that you are taking. You are not here by accident. You're not here by mere coincidence. You are exactly where you're supposed to be, and this is our conversation. On the show, sometimes I'll have guests come in, sometimes I'll just be talking to you or with you, but remember, it is still our conversation. You can communicate with me via the chat or the email address, but remember, this is your time, you are safe here, and you are seen here. Okay, friends, let's get into it. As I've been teasing, we are going to have our very long awaited listeners episode. Rounds of applause. I am just so excited because, to be totally honest, this type of episode is the reason that I even started this show. I wanted to build a community that's safe, that talks about mental health. And like Letitia said, thank you so much for joining, wealth. Not just getting well for ourselves as individuals, but getting well for ourselves as part of larger communities, the Black community, the local and the international Black community, people that identify as African or people in the African diaspora. It's getting well for all of us who are too afraid to talk about it. So to be able to connect with you all on this listeners episode, I am just so excited. It has been a long day for me at work. I do work full time as an attorney, but you better believe that reading some of these comments and these stories have given me so much energy. So let's just get right into it. Again, many of you have heard me multiple times with my producer talk about our email address for this show. And I was not joking when I said, you get to consult with me for free about all things mental health. I am a mental health advocate. I did disability rights law for half of my legal career, and I have lived experience. So it was so good to hear from a lot of you about the questions you have related to mental health. And it has been so nice to just read through your stories. And this episode is going to be exactly that. So let's dig in without further ado. What I'm going to do is just read through the email, and then I'm going to brainstorm in real time with the person who emailed me, whose location and last name are going to remain anonymous. But they emailed me, and everyone who has emailed me has given me permission to share their experiences on this show and to use their first names. Okay, let's see what we have. So one of the emails I received reads like this. Hi, Joyce. I'm a regular listener of your show and really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you so much for our community. I'm in my early 30s and working in a high pressure job. Lately, I've been feeling extremely overwhelmed and it's starting to affect my mental health. Do you have any effective strategies for managing stress and avoiding burnout? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this during your next episode. Thanks so much, Malik. Awesome. So, first of all, I want to thank Malik for actually sending that in because I know it was sent a while ago before we even got to the listeners episode. So, thank you so much for your patience. I promised you that we would get here. And when we're thinking about high stress jobs, how many of us work high stress jobs? How many of us, and again, a job can be what you do in an office, what you do on site, what you do at home. Those are all jobs, and all of that can curate and bring stress. The one thing that I'm always thinking about when I'm thinking about burnout, the stress that we do, and also how many of y'all work more than one job? Because a lot of us know that our jobs aren't just the things that pay us. I do a lot of work with my church. I do a lot of work in my community, and a lot of us don't have the privilege of just doing one thing day to day, right? All of that counts. So let's think critically and meaningfully about how we can manage burnout and our mental health when in these high stress environments called life often. The first thing I think we need to think about is how important it is to build systems of sustainability. Sustainability is one of my favorite words because it doesn't matter how smart you are, how clever you are, how skilled you are, if the work that you're doing is not sustainable, meaning you cannot do the work at the same pace day in and day out, it doesn't matter. So it's important that we all think about how to sustain our mental health in these environments. And one thing is identify stressors and set boundaries. Identify the things that stress you out at your job and set boundaries. So figuring this out can help you consider what your next steps can be when you're burning out or when you are in kind of like a crisis. And what it looks like to identify your stressors and to set boundaries, it could be as manageable as delegating your tasks. I know for those of you who like control, it's kind of hard to delegate. But when you're stressed out or feeling burnt out, it's important to remember we were made for community. It's why mental wealth is so important. We were made to pour into other people, but also to have people pour into us. So, learning how to delegate your tasks actually helps you manage your stress because you realize you don't got to do everything. And in fact, it's impossible for you to do everything. So, really embrace task delegation or asking people just to help you. Also, saying no to additional responsibilities can also be an option for you. I know that we're often pressured to show up in our workplace and be like these ace employees and to take on everything and to do everything. But it is more important to do things well than to have a lot on your plate that you cannot manage. You can learn ways to say no that are as professional and effective. For example, when my boss asks me to take on an extra project and I know that I do not have the capacity to take it on, I can simply say, hey, this, and this is what I'm working on right now. I am so interested in what you've asked me to do, and I would love to take that on, except I'm prioritizing the other projects that we've discussed, and I can turn to this at this time. Does that timeline work for you? That is a really fancy way of saying this is what I'm working on, but no. So there are ways to get around it. I also think that if you're not able to say no and you're not able to take to delegate your tasks or even take a regular break, you might want to consider looking for an entirely different environment. Stress is actually a normal part of life. It is okay to be challenged. We're going to meet and face challenges. We shouldn't run from that. But if you are in a high level, high stress job that is consistently keeping you stressed out, you can also and should also consider options and environments that better align with your personal beliefs, your capacity, and the things that you're passionate about. Because again, it is not sustainable to be and sustain yourself or to stay in a high stress environment. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your physical health long term. So, also, if that's an option, consider changing environments altogether. It's worth it for your health in the long run. You can also incorporate relaxation techniques at your office. Did you know that? It doesn't have to be as drastic as doing yoga or stretching, in the middle of the hallway, although I'm not opposed to stretching at your desk. That helps with your blood flow and it helps with circulation and it helps with relaxing. But a relaxation technique could be deep breathing when you're at your desk. The same deep breathing that we did when we were starting off this conversation. Breathe in through your nose, hold it for a few counts, and breathe out through your mouth. And you can do that a few times until you feel grounded and until you feel better focused and able to go to your tasks. I also love the idea of just going on a walk during my lunch break. It's about summertime here in Chicago, so the weather is gorgeous, finally. So go for a walk. Be outside for a little bit during your lunch break. You don't have to eat at your desk all the time if that's an option for you. Or maybe after work, you can go for a walk. Just something to break up your day. And again, to get your body moving a little bit if you're able to. Open a window, get some fresh air. All of these things are ways to just incorporate relaxation techniques. One of the things I really want to mention for this is look away from your screen if you have one of those jobs that require you to look at a screen for hours on end. Incorporate the 20-20-20 rule. What is that? That means you can look at your screen for 20 minutes, but every 20 minutes, look away from your screen at something that is about 20 feet away, something in the distance, for 20 seconds. 20-20-20. That helps with your vision, and it also helps break up your day and gives you something that is not so monotonous and staring at your screen, which could lead to headaches, which could affect your mood and your mental health. So those are some easy techniques that you can incorporate to manage your stress, along with task delegation and other things. And I also really encourage you, Malik, to seek support. A lot of our employers have these things called employee assistance programs. EAP. Ask your HR about this. Employee assistance programs. Did you know that a lot of your employers could give you up to 5 free counseling sessions through these employee assistance programs? There are ways to get support for your mental health if you need it in your workplace. And you don't even have to phrase it like, I'm having a crisis and I need mental health help. I have had a whole episode about mental health in the workplace that you can go to. I'm happy to talk about it more, but I definitely encourage you to look into employee assistance programs if your job provides it. I hope that was helpful. Okay, let's look at the next email. And the subject for this email that came to me, and for those of you who just joined, hello, we are going through some emails sent to me personally for people just looking for advice and just how to process some of the issues that they're facing related to their mental health. So this one is called Mental Health Stigma. And it says, hi, thank you for your incredible show. Oh, thank you so much. It has been a great resource for me and many others. I've noticed that my mental health stigma is still very obvious in our community. I want to help start conversations about mental health to reduce stigma and encourage more Black people to seek help. But I'm not sure where to start. Could you share some tips on how to begin these important conversations? Best, Tasha. Tasha, first, thank you so much for writing in and thank you so much for watching the show. I really appreciate your viewership and I appreciate you being part of our community and what I call our virtual family. So thank you, Tasha. This is a fantastic question because as Black people, we understand that there still is a stigma around mental health. That is actually the entire reason why I started this show. So thank you so much for asking this question about how to break down these stigmas and how to even have a conversation. I would say that the very first thing that you need to do is educate yourself. Once you educate yourself, then you can educate others. What do I mean by that? So it is important that you yourself break down the stigmas that you may have about mental health. How many of you can relate? We all have stigmas about mental health because that's what it means to be a part of a society that stigmatizes it. I had to get over those stigmas when I was first diagnosed with major depression years and years ago. I literally told, I think it was a therapist or a doctor, I was in law school at the time, and I was like, I don't got time to have a mental illness. You're saying I have anxiety disorder? I have a final coming up. I don't have time to have anxiety. That's like a privilege to be anxious. It's a privilege, it felt to me, to be depressed. So I had to unlearn a lot of these stigmas myself. And in unlearning them, I was able to heal, thankfully. But that was the only time that I was also able to educate other people. So make sure that you're being honest about the stigmas that you may have, Tasha, about mental health. And also make sure that the information that you're sharing is accurate. You don't want to share information that is false. We have a lot of false ideas about bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Did you know that most people that have bipolar disorder and schizophrenia actually are not violent? But when we watch TV, we see them as murderers and all of these horrible stigmatized things. But actually, majority of people with those kind of psychiatric disorders, mental health disorders, are not violent. And that's important, that when you're sharing about mental health, that you yourself know what you're talking about. I also think that it's important to be mindful of your language. When we say things like, oh, that's so crazy, what do we mean by that? Or when the weather is changing, I've heard people say, the weather is so bipolar. It's raining one day and then now it's like sunny all of a sudden. Bipolar disorder is a legitimate disease that affects millions of people. And it doesn't help when we're moving away from a stigma to use phrases like that to describe the weather when it's a legitimate illness that people are trying to heal from. So it's little things like that, like watching our language and educating ourselves. I also know that it is so important, Tasha, to open up about your personal experiences. Maybe you are a person who has mental health history or experience. Maybe you have a close family member that has mental health history and experience. And it is important that you share your story. That is why I'm here. I'm talking about things that I have gone through that has helped me get to a place of wellness and mental abundance or mental wealth. And when we share our stories, people are set free. I worked with veterans who were shocked that I was an attorney who had also overcome anxiety disorder and depression. And one veteran actually looked at me. He was a Black man. I'll never forget it. And he was like, I didn't know that someone that looks like you could have a mental illness or have experienced that in the past. And I said, it can affect all of us. It can affect anyone. There's no one way that it looks, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. So, Tasha, if you have a connection, whether it's personal or like a family member or friend, with permission, share those stories so that people feel more comfortable coming forward and people can get set free. I also think it's important to create the environment that you want. I created this virtual community because I thought it was so important that we had these conversations and that we were able to talk about it openly and safely, that y'all were able to email me the way you've been emailing me. Thank you. But I didn't see this at play. So I decided to create the environment that I wanted, and I wanted it to be safe and I wanted it to be open. So that's something that I empower you, Tasha, to also consider doing, is create the environment that you want to see. And that will help go towards the stigma. I have a few more people who have written into me, and I'm going to take one more, but I want to say, fear not. For those of you who I have not gotten to that I said I'm going to talk about on this listeners episode, we are going to have a follow-up part 2 of this very, very soon. So stay tuned for what's to come. But let me take one more listeners email because I really, really, really want to get into this next question. This one is about starting therapy, and it says, hi, Joyce. I'm an avid listener of Cultivate Your Mental Wealth, and it has really helped me in my personal journey. Great. I've been considering starting therapy, but I'm unsure where to begin. What should I look for in a therapist, and how can I find one that understands the unique challenges faced by our community? Your guidance would be greatly appreciated. Warm regards, David. Thank you so much for writing in, David. And by our community, I'm assuming that you mean the Black community. This is blackdoctor.org. After all, although all are welcome, we really want to make sure that we get resources to the Black community who's been underserved in the past. But David, thank you so much for writing in. This is an important question, and I'll tell you why. I had a whole episode on this as well, and I'm happy to talk about it again, but there is a history of distrust of medical professionals by a lot of Black people. And that history is a valid one because there has been a lot of abuse of Black people by medical professionals. So I understand the hesitancy in seeking medical help or even help from a licensed therapist because of that kind of complicated history. That being said, help is possible and help is available, I promise. The first thing I would say is look at research and referrals. So I advise that you research therapists who specialize in the areas that are relevant to you. And it could be as simple as if you're experiencing sadness or nervousness, or if you are experiencing times where you don't sleep, you can literally Google therapists near me or therapists in my area and just kind of describe what you are experiencing. And there are therapists that could show up that specialize in the things that you want to process with someone. So definitely do your research, and there's so much available online, including an episode that I've dedicated to finding a therapist. I'm happy to send that to you one-on-one. I also love word of mouth. There is nothing like getting a referral from someone that you trust. So be open, ask a family member, ask a neighbor, ask a friend, maybe someone, if you're religious in your religious circle, someone in your church, because they might have a referral for you for someone that they trust who can actually help you in this way. Referrals are awesome because it's firsthand knowledge and it's word of mouth. And that's actually one of the best ways to find the best resources to best suit you. Also, I would definitely say, David, when considering a therapist, is consider someone who is culturally competent. What does that mean? I don't want to hear anyone saying, Joyce, does that mean that only Black people can help Black people? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that it is important that when you're seeking resources, you are with someone who understands your cultural, racial, ethnic background so that they can see things through that lens when they're advising you. Therapy isn't one size fits all. You need someone who at least is sensitive and knowledgeable about the issues that you experience and all of your identities to best equip you in your journey towards healing. It was very important for me to find a therapist who is Black. I wanted a therapist who I can talk to about being a woman. And I wanted a Christian because I wanted someone who's going to talk to me about scripture, things that I can pray about, things that I can believe God for. And I didn't want them looking at me like, you believe in God? Okay. I wanted someone that I could connect to in that way. So that kind of competency, that cultural competency, again, it doesn't mean that they have to be Black to treat you. It does mean that it is important that when you're talking to a therapist, that they understand some of the things that you have experienced as a member of a certain community or the Black community, or as being a woman or being a Christian or religious or a-religious. Just something that means that they're competent to see your perspective and to serve you in the way that you need. Which brings me to my last point about this. Initial consultations are free. They should be free. I say shop around, date your therapist. What do I mean by date? I'm not saying dinner and drinks. What I am saying is you're not tied to them. You're not married to them. Have a consultation with them. It can be as short as 15 minutes. Ask them questions about their background in anxiety disorder, if that's what you're struggling with, or their background in grief counseling, if that's what you're struggling with. Ask them if they've ever treated someone who's had these issues. Ask them what they believe on certain things so that you can get a better understanding about how they can serve you and whether it's going to fit your needs. Shop around, date your therapist. It's totally okay. But David, I'm so happy that you are looking into these resources, and thank you so much for writing in. So I want to thank all of you who have been tuning in so far. Letitia, again, I want to give you a shout out. I practice in Illinois. I am licensed in the state of Illinois. And Verlyn, is so good to see you. I also want to say, if you were not able to get your comments answered again, we are going to do another part of this. I have a few more emails that I want to go through about grief, about healing, about self-care tips if you're a caregiver. So tune in next time for a continuation of our listeners episode. Before you go, I also want to say, make sure that you share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. Anyone, whether it's a family member or a friend. You can watch this episode on repeat on our Facebook page, but you can also watch it on YouTube. Before we go, I want to get to my favorite part of the segment, and that is practical pushes for your week. Let's get into it. Again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight and joining the conversation. Thank you to every single person who has written into the show. Like I promised, we are answering your questions. We're processing in real time. We're giving you a shout out if you want it. And I've just loved having this conversation with all of you. If you would like your questions answered on the show, you can always email at comethrive247@gmail.com. That's comethrive247@gmail.com. And you too can be a part of the show. But as we wrap up, I want to say happy Mental Health Awareness Month. Yes, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it is so important that we have these kinds of conversation amongst ourselves so that we can raise awareness on mental health and get to places of mental healing so that we can be well in abundance. But before the month is over, it's not quite over yet. You still have a few more days to go. And I challenge each of you to have a meaningful conversation about mental health with at least one family member or friend this week. Have a substantive conversation about it. And it could be you checking in on them. It could be you sharing your experience or something that you're struggling with. It could be you just making sure that they're not alone and that they know that you're there for them. But have one meaningful conversation about mental health this month to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month, because sharing your experiences and listening to others can make a huge difference in breaking the stigma and fostering a supportive community. Remember, we were made for each other. Don't let anyone tell you different. And also remember that we have to cultivate our mental wealth, and we have to do that together. Friends, I promise you, wellness is for us. Wellness is possible. And on that note, I hope you all go thrive. Until next time, good night, friends.